Go to a concert, that's a very special experience for people because you know what? When people go to a concert, they actually have the right, in the same way that you talked about when you would hear these Miles records when they first came out. But if they sit in their seat, they can respond to the music based on their personal feeling about the experience. It's a very special thing. And everybody in the room is doing that. And I think if you communicate with the audience to the point where everybody starts to feel the same thing, that's communion, right? That's a very, very special occurrence when it happens. And I hope it happens, on April 15th. But that's something that we in the audience have to come together on for it to happen. So the musician and audience, and as Coltrane said, when he really felt that he was communicating with his audience a certain way, everybody got it. He felt like they became like the fifth member of his band.
Everybody, it's Mike Jaffe for Chicago Jazz Magazine, chicagojazz.com, and welcome to another episode of Around Town. And this is a very special episode. I am honored to be joined by the legendary pianist Marcus Roberts. He is on today talking a little bit about, well, let me preface, Marcus and I could talk probably for 2 hours about his career to set that up, but we're not going to spend that kind of time today. Maybe I can have him on at a later date for that. But the exciting thing is he is bringing his trio to the Music Institute of Chicago, April 15th, 7:30 p.m. Of course, it's right up there at Nichols Hall in Evanston. Address is 1490 Chicago Avenue in Evanston. Of course, tickets, we'll link it all up below, but it's musicinst.org. Tickets are moving, so I would suggest everybody go get those because to hear him play in live and in person is something special. Marcus, thanks so much for taking a few minutes today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
So let's talk a little bit about this performance that you're going to be doing on April 15th for the Music Institute. Rhythm and Blue is the name of the recording. And, what it says on the website, there's a combination of your compositions, your longtime drummer, Jason Marsalis' compositions, and then a myriad of different jazz music influences, I'm sure, of yours. So talk a little bit about the show and what people can kind of expect to hear from the trio that night.
Sure. Well, this trio, what I've always wanted to do was I imagined a group where the bass and drums would have just an active role in determining the direction of an arrangement as the piano. And so a lot of the music that I do, that's what it is. And we have arrangements that, in this case, are going to probably be mostly jazz standards, right? Like I love Earl Garner's arrangement of Where a Wind, so we do that. We do Lady Bird, we do The Way You Look Tonight, but we have a different spin on it so that we can feature Jason Marsalis for sure, his incredible genius talent. He's been with me almost 30 years now.
Oh.
And yeah, I know it's crazy. And I mean, he's an absolute genius. Like I can literally tell him when you hear me modulate to A major, I want you to switch to brushes and play in 5/4, and he can do it. I mean, it's not fair.
Man, oh man.
And so these arrangements cover a wide gamut. We feature our bassist on Haitian Fight Song, Charles Mingus. There's a fascinating way that Jason does with a tune of his called One Man Band, where he literally takes the snare drum off, and he plays this whole tune with just the snare drum. And I had no idea you could get all these timbres out of one drum, but he does it. So that's really the focus of it. And what I always tell people, because unfortunately jazz music gets this reputation of being like old, but not in a complimentary way, right?
Right.
It's almost like, okay, we're gonna go to the Louvre, and we know it's great art, but none of it has anything to do with my life or what I do. And I try to explain to folks that actually jazz music is all about you. Our whole focus then is to let people know, don't worry too much about when something was written. I always say, pretend it was written last week just for you and do what you want with it. And I think that helps us to keep our music relevant and to keep it in the community in a way where people can be influenced by it, inspired by it, and we can find more and more ways for people to just use it in their normal everyday life.
Well, I love that. I've never heard anybody talk about it that way. I always bring up the fact that these days with jazz music, and I mean, this pertains to you too, because you play so many different styles of jazz and classical and everything else, and everything kind of melds together and comes out as your voice, right? So if I'm
Sure.
going to see a jazz trio, I'm going to see Marcus Roberts trio. That's who I'm going to see that night specifically. And that's what I find. I mean, and I know you're an educator and you teach a lot of young kids and stuff, but they're influenced by so many things. And just reading over some of the repertoire you guys are going to perform or at least pull from,
Mhm.
I mean, Cole Porter, John Coltrane, Leonard Bernstein, Gershwin, Jelly Roll Morton. I mean,
Right.
just that, all those different styles melded together, but that still has to come out in your voice, right? I mean, that's the
Oh,
whole
sure.
goal.
Sure, because if you think about it, our voice is really just a collection of our experiences and our knowledge base and our belief system, right? That's really all it is. So when I listen to John Coltrane, who, if somebody said you got like an hour left on the planet, what do you want to hear? It's probably going to be some Train, okay? But
Mhm.
I think of what part of Coltrane do I consider to be part of my voice too. So it's not like I'm ever trying to imitate Coltrane, which would be impossible. Even though if I could, I would.
Mhm.
But it's more that I want to find the part of his personality that I identify with and can do something with. The same with a lot of the great artists. I love Monk, I love Jelly Roll, and I'm always looking for, I guess you might call it, the link or the fabric that connects that quote unquote older style or foundational voice to mine. That's always been my interest.
That's a great way to think about that too, because it just it allows you to learn the music. And I mean, we've all done transcribing as musicians,
Right.
we've all listened to it and gotten in deep, but that's a great way to think about pulling something from one of the masters and utilizing it as your own, because there's a link then. And
Yes.
that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I think of it that way because I think everybody's so, of course, interested in wanting to differentiate themselves, I guess from other artists. And some of that is commercialism. You know what I mean? Some of it is, well, if I'm going to buy your record, well, why would I buy it if it's just like all the others? But I think the mistake there is we don't acknowledge the fact that every musician, regardless of their level of aptitude or ability, every musician has their own vocabulary and their own language and their own perspective. But I think what happens is when we teach jazz to young people, we're teaching them the mechanics of it, but we're not teaching them how to use the spice of it, meaning the folk music of their childhood. Like maybe they grew up in the Himalayas and there's special music that they grew up just being able to play. And they don't understand that you could bring that into the jazz language that you want to build. Like I grew up in church. So a lot of that music and a lot of that influence, a lot of the same chords are present in jazz. It's just that again, it's like a folk element of it. So I'm always interested in finding that folk element from something that maybe somebody hummed it in a cave 800 years ago, right? And then you have that, and then you have a tapestry or colors or some complex structure that you might want to put it in. But you kind of need both things because the people they want to hear something that they would think to themselves, I think I could hum that. I think I
Mhm.
could tap out that rhythm, right? And that's one of the things that we try to do when we perform for people is to give them something that hopefully will initiate a response that says, "Yeah, me too."
Well, and that's one of the things to wrap it around to the trio aspect of it and performing as a trio. And you've performed with Jason Marsalis for 30 years. You mentioned, which is unbelievable. And on this set that you're going to be doing April 15th at the Music Institute of Chicago, you're going to have Martin Jaffe on bass. Of course, you've performed with Rodney Jordan for many years, but
Oh
Martin
yeah.
Jaffe, an accomplished bassist in his own right. But I'm assuming when you put a trio together like this, and especially with what you're describing, everybody's got to have a like mind. So everybody has to kind of understand how everybody else is moving, how everybody else is going. But then you also have to have the freedom. You're the leader, but Jason and Martin have to have the freedom to feel pretty confident in adding their own thing in there and kind of shifting the trio a little bit, and kind of everybody goes a different route, right? Because I know that you guys play very cohesively, but you take a lot of different turns when you guys are playing together. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, part of it is that improvisation, jazz improvisation, what makes it special and unique among, I think, a lot of the improvised musics of the world is that in jazz music, we have a range of virtuosity and a range of styles and perspectives that each person brings to it simultaneously. And that makes it both fascinating, but also very difficult. So yeah, it takes some years to develop the trust, the cooperative attitude, and the belief in the music collectively for you to produce music that really still sounds simple to people, which is what you hope for. But when you dig under the hood and you realize what's really going on, you're like, oh my goodness, this stuff is pretty rich. So, and I think I always tell people what keeps a band together really isn't so much money. I mean, don't get me wrong, that helps. But what really keeps it together is the feeling that we're not done yet. There's still things that we want to do. And I think Jason still continues to play my crazy arrangements and deal with a lot of the stuff that I want to do because I make sure that he's featured heavily. And then I really identify with his personal view. And even though I started off mentoring him when he was 17 or so, at this stage of the game, he'll tell me, well, no, I think we should do this. I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right. So it's that give and take and that mutual respect and that sense that in a weird way, we're all mentoring each other. And even Martin Jaffe, Rodney Jordan, great bassist who's been in my trio for years, he's mentoring him. So this is how jazz always has been, going all the way back to King Oliver and Louis Armstrong or James B. Johnson and Fats Waller. I mean, the mentoring conception, which again, in our society, I think jazz is a good model because that's what we really should be doing in American democratic society, is to mentor, support, believe in, and uplift each other. That's what the focus of our music is. And despite a lot of the difficult circumstances that a lot of the musicians who created it went through, jazz was a way that they could describe a world that they felt they should have, and they could show people through their virtuosity and elegant clothes that they would wear, and the way that Duke Ellington would talk on the microphone, and the fantastic way that Miles Davis would begin and end his solos and pull out that harmon mute and just dazzle everybody. I think that is a big part of why I'm proud to be a jazz musician. And I hope when people come and check it out, they'll be able to take that same feeling home with them and add it to their life in some positive way.
Well, that's the way you just described all that is exactly right and exactly how I feel too. I just can't describe it as eloquently as you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
That's why I'm glad you're on the show today. But that's amazing. And I think you're right. I mean, and on April 15th, and I was going to bring this up, we're talking about mentorship. We're talking about nowadays and even democratic politics and things like that. Everybody's kind of online all the time, right? So, I mean, for those young musicians that are coming up, I mean, you were mentored by people. I was mentored by people because I'm in my 50s. So I was mentored by people coming up through the clubs, going to school, playing and sitting in and stuff. But I think a lot of times now everybody gets online, watches YouTube videos, and that mentorship isn't as much as it used to be out and about in like playing with professionals. So coming on April 15th to actually see something live, it's just a whole different ballgame than anything you can take in online. I mean, and I'm sure you have a lot of students that probably say, oh man, I watch tons of YouTube videos and I sit and I shed my space all the time. I mean, why do I have to go here? Why do I have to go there? It's just a different energy, different vibe, and you're able to talk to people as well, right?
Exactly. It's a different energy. And unfortunately, jazz music is a group music. So you got to be with people to learn how to play it. You can't really learn how to play it in your dorm room by yourself all the time. And one of the issues I have with social media is you'll remember, because we're around the same age or kind of close to it, when you were a kid, like if something moved you, right, you could like maybe you've been working on a transcription or something, and you worked on a Sonny Rollins transcription or something, and you realize something deep about the record that you just bought, and you call up a friend and say, man, this was incredible. Something about this particular piece really moved me, and it made me feel like this, and it made me feel like that. And it was truly an individual ownership of a moment where your imagination was sparked or something strictly individual about yourself came out. But now if you were to go up on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and do the same thing and say something moved you, somebody's going to lump you in a category with some other people who agree, or say that you're against these other people who disagree. So the whole idea of an individual perspective and point of view of being moved by something feels like it's kind of gone.
No, I think you're right. And you made me remember back. I mean, I can remember waiting for whatever, a Miles recording to come out, because when I was first getting into jazz, like the Tutu recording got me into it, and then I went backwards, right?
Right.
And so I would wait for that next Miles recording to come out. I'd go get it, bring it home, listen to it from start to finish, and just be like, oh my God, man, it's unbelievable. But I never thought about that aspect, because if I would now go online and say, oh man, check this out, and then somebody'd say, Miles is selling out, man, it's all electric and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. I mean, it's like they strip you of your individual right to be moved by something individually. It's a very unfortunate. So when you go to a concert, that's a very special experience for people, because you know what? When people go to a concert, they actually have the right, in the same way that you talked about when you would hear these Miles records when they first came out. But if they sit in their seat, they can respond to the music based on their personal feeling about the experience. It's a very special thing. And everybody in the room is doing that. Yeah. And I think if you communicate with the audience to the point where everybody starts to feel the same thing, that's communion, right? That's a very, very special occurrence when it happens. And I hope it happens, on April 15th, but that's something that we in the audience have to come together on for it to happen. So the musician and audience, and as Coltrane said, when he really felt that he was communicating with his audience a certain way, everybody got it. He felt like they became like the fifth member of his band.
It's been a treat, Marcus. I really appreciate it. So let me remind everybody, Marcus Roberts Trio, April 15th, Music Institute of Chicago. Of course, it's in Nichols Hall, 1490 Chicago Avenue in Evanston. musicinst.org for tickets. Everything's linked up below. Of course, send everybody over to marcusroberts.com for all the info on Marcus. And I know we talked a little bit before we came on, and maybe we can catch back up in the fall, but you do have some releases coming up that you're going to be launching as
Yes, I'd love to do that. Yeah, we got some stuff coming out, hopefully either in the summer or early fall. So yeah, I'd love to get back on there and tell everybody about it.
That would be great. I would love to have you, and we could talk a little bit more about everything that I want to talk about, but we don't have to talk about.
Well, we'll do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Marcus, for being on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much. You got a great show. A lot of good people on there. So y'all keep supporting his show and jazz in general. Just we all got to stay on it.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. And of course, thanks everybody for watching and listening. And as I always say, all information is at chicagojazz.com. And until next time, hopefully I will see you all somewhere out on the scene.